Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary Viking chieftain whose name would echo through the annals of history, met a fate as dramatic and haunting as the life he had led. From his early exploits along the coasts of Scandinavia to his audacious raids on the kingdoms of England and Francia, Ragnar had carved a reputation as a cunning strategist, fearless warrior, and unyielding leader. He was a man who refused to bow to kings or emperors, and his ambitions were as boundless as the seas he sailed. Yet, despite his cunning and foresight, even Ragnar could not foresee the trap that awaited him on the shores of Northumbria. It began during one of his most daring campaigns, an incursion into the heart of Northumbria, a kingdom that had grown wary of Viking raids but underestimated the ferocity of Ragnar. Known for his ability to exploit both fear and diplomacy, Ragnar initially sought to negotiate, leveraging his reputation as a fearsome warrior and respected leader. But King Aella, the ruler of Northumbria, harbored deep resentment toward the Viking invaders. The memory of previous raids, pillaged villages, and stolen wealth festered into a personal vendetta. Aella, cunning in his own right, saw an opportunity to turn the tables on the man who had terrorized England's northern shores. The trap was meticulously laid. Under the guise of a diplomatic meeting, Ragnar was lured into Aella's court, where the halls were silent, the guards poised, and the king's intentions cloaked in deception. Ragnar, though astute, underestimated Aella's treachery. Perhaps it was the confidence born from years of unbroken victories, or perhaps it was the lure of opportunity and negotiation that clouded his judgment. Whatever the reason, Ragnar was captured, stripped of his freedom, and thrown into the grim pit that would become his tomb. A pit crawling with venomous snakes, each one a silent witness to the vengeance of a king who had waited years for this moment. As Ragnar descended into the pit, his fate seemed sealed, yet his legendary courage remained unshaken. The sagas recount that even in the face of certain death, Ragnar displayed a macabre sense of humor, mocking the very snakes that surrounded him. His mind, ever sharp, reportedly contemplated the irony of dying in such a manner. A warrior felled not by sword or spear, but by serpents in a pit designed to prolong agony. This death, horrifying as it was, became emblematic of Ragnar's life, dramatic, perilous, and larger than any ordinary man could endure. It was a spectacle of cruelty, yet also of legacy, as the tale of his final moments would spread far and wide, cementing his story in the hearts and minds of the Viking people. The news of Ragnar's demise did not remain confined to the court of Northumbria. It traveled swiftly across the seas and the lands, carried by merchants, fleeing villagers, and surviving warriors. Each retelling amplified the horror and the heroism, painting Ragnar as both victim and legend. In Scandinavia, the news hit like a thunderclap. Villages and longhouses, from the fjords of Norway to the far reaches of Denmark and Sweden, buzzed with disbelief and mourning. His sons, still young but already trained in the arts of war and leadership, received the news with a mix of shock, grief, and a burgeoning rage that would define their destinies. Bjorn Ironside, Ragnar's eldest, felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him instantly. Known for his formidable strength and fearless nature, Bjorn's grief was tempered by a rising determination. The tales of his father's capture and the treachery of King Aella ignited a fire that would fuel every decision he made in the years to come. Ivar the Boneless, though physically disabled, experienced a different but equally potent stir of vengeance. His mind, already renowned for strategic brilliance, began plotting a campaign that would one day stretch across kingdoms. Fitzurk, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, and Ubi each processed the loss in their own way, but the outcome was the same, a united resolve to avenge their father's brutal death. Among the Vikings, Ragnar's death was more than a personal tragedy. It was a call to arms. His life had been a beacon of Viking audacity, showing that no kingdom, no matter how fortified, could stand unchallenged against the longships of the north. His demise, cruel as it was, ignited a collective fury among those who had followed him, fought alongside him, or revered him from afar. The pit of snakes, intended as a symbol of humiliation and power by King Aella, instead became a rallying point, a story that would inspire vengeance and reverence in equal measure. It was a death that ensured Ragnar Lothbrok would not be forgotten, that his legend would only grow more potent with time. Even in death, Ragnar's cunning left its mark. According to saga accounts, he whispered prophecies of revenge, hinting at the eventual downfall of Aella and the rise of his sons. These whispered promises became fuel for the next generation, shaping the ambitions of the very warriors who would one day lead the Great Heathen Army into England, not merely as raiders but as avengers of their father's demise. The Pit of Snakes, a prison meant to erase him, instead immortalized Ragnar's legend, turning his death into a prelude to the vengeance that would shake the foundations of kingdoms. Thus, the shocking death of Ragnar Lothbrok was not merely an end, it was the catalyst for one of the most dramatic revenge sagas in Viking history. The image of the great chieftain, in a pit of writhing snakes, defiant to the last breath, became a symbol of both the brutality of his enemies and the enduring power of his legacy. His sons, driven by grief, honor, and the unquenchable fire of vengeance, began to prepare. The story of Ragnar's death set into motion a chain of events that would span years, shaping the destinies of men, kingdoms, and entire regions. In every whispered tale, in every warrior's oath, Ragnar Lothbrok's final moments resonated, a testament to a life that refused to be quietly forgotten, and a death that demanded retribution. The death of Ragnar Lothbrok was a tragedy that shook the Viking world to its core, but it was also a spark that ignited the fire of vengeance. His sons, Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, and Ubi, were scattered across the Norse territories, each pursuing their own exploits, yet all bound by the bloodline of a father whose legacy demanded retaliation. The news of Ragnar's capture and brutal execution did not merely reach them as a story of grief, it arrived as a summons to action, a call to arms that would unify them under the singular purpose of revenge. Bjorn Ironside, the eldest and most physically imposing of the sons, was the first to respond. Already known among the Viking communities for his extraordinary strength and prowess in battle, Bjorn had earned the respect of countless warriors. His reputation as a fearless raider and strategist made him a natural leader in the eyes of his brothers and followers. Upon hearing of his father's death, Bjorn felt a dual surge of grief and rage. But unlike Ivar, who would channel his intellect into meticulous planning, Bjorn's instinct was to strike. His first moves were to consolidate forces among the northern chieftains and assemble loyal warriors who would heed the call for vengeance without question. In his mind, the killing of King Aella could not be delayed. Swift retribution was essential to honor Ragnar's memory. Ivar the Boneless, in contrast, approached the situation from a different angle. Despite his physical disability, which left him unable to walk or fight in the traditional sense, Ivar possessed a mind as sharp and unforgiving as the steel blades his warriors wielded. He saw the tragedy not merely as a loss, but as an opportunity to orchestrate one of the most precise campaigns of revenge the Viking world had ever witnessed. Ivar's strategic brilliance became immediately evident. He began gathering intelligence from traders, messengers, and spies who had witnessed King Aella's actions firsthand. He charted the political landscape of Northumbria, identifying not only Aella but also the nobles, generals, and advisors who had contributed to Ragnar's capture. For Ivar, revenge would not be an uncontrolled outburst of fury. It would be a calculated operation designed to strike fear and ensure complete retribution. Sigurd Snake in the Eye, named for the striking mark in his iris that resembled the twisting pattern of a serpent, brought a combination of courage and cunning. Known for his loyalty and sharp instincts, Sigurd understood the importance of timing and subtlety. He was instrumental in persuading reluctant Viking factions to join the campaign, emphasizing the sacred duty of avenging Ragnar Lothbrok. Meanwhile, Hvitserk, who had experienced the brutality of war firsthand but had not yet achieved the fame of his brothers, took on the role of mediator and recruiter. Hvitserk's charisma and knowledge of various Viking clans made him essential in forging alliances with distant leaders, ensuring that the sons would have a formidable coalition when they finally descended upon Northumbria. Ubi, The youngest of the five, contributed youthful vigor and untested courage, ready to learn from his elder brothers and play his part in the coming storm. Uniting the brothers was not a simple task. Each had his own temperament, his own ambitions, and his own followers to manage. Bjorn's impulsive nature sometimes clashed with Ivar's meticulous plans, while Sigurd's caution conflicted with Ubi's eagerness. Yet, the shared grief and burning desire for vengeance provided a common ground that could not be ignored. Through councils held in fjords and meadows, in longhouses and along the shores of rivers, the brothers deliberated, argued, and finally reached consensus. Their father's death would not go unanswered. They would hunt down every man responsible, and King Aella himself would face a fate fitting the cruelty he had inflicted upon Ragnar. The brothers' first steps were strategic. They dispatched scouts to gather intelligence on Northumbria, learning the layout of fortresses, the disposition of troops, and the loyalties of nobles. Ivar's insight proved invaluable in this phase. He anticipated potential betrayals, recognized hidden weaknesses in the kingdom's defenses, and devised contingency plans that would minimize Viking losses while maximizing their impact. Bjorn, Sigurd, and Ubi oversaw the recruitment of warriors traveling through Denmark, Sweden, and Norway to rally men willing to fight under their banner. Tales of Ragnar's death and the promised vengeance inspired loyalty and dedication. Warriors from far-flung villages pledged themselves to the cause, driven as much by the legend of Ragnar as by the opportunity to strike fear into the hearts of the English. Alliances were carefully cultivated. Viking politics were often as treacherous as the battlefields themselves, and the sons of Ragnar understood that trust was a fragile commodity. They negotiated with chieftains who had once fought alongside their father, promising a share of plunder and the honor of participating in a righteous campaign. Each meeting was calculated, every promise and oath carried the weight of both personal honor and political necessity. Ivar, in particular, leveraged his reputation for cunning and ruthlessness to secure alliances that might otherwise have been impossible. His ability to turn potential rivals into allies would later prove crucial in sustaining the prolonged campaign against Northumbria. During this period, the sons also honed their personal skills, understanding that victory would require more than mere numbers. Bjorn trained relentlessly, demonstrating to his warriors that leadership demanded both courage and discipline. Sigurd and Fitzurk refined their tactical approaches, rehearsing maneuvers that would allow small Viking forces to outwit and overwhelm larger enemy contingents. Ubi learned the arts of diplomacy and deception, guided by the experience and wisdom of his elder siblings. Even Ivar, confined physically, practiced strategies in miniature. Maps and models of fortresses and battlefields allowed him to envision outcomes with surgical precision. Yet amid the strategic planning and preparation, the sons were also guided by a personal and spiritual motivation. Ragnar's death had not only been a physical loss, but also a moral affront. The manner of his execution, the pit of snakes, the public humiliation, the cruelty, demanded a response that transcended ordinary revenge. It became a sacred duty, a filial obligation intertwined with the honor of their lineage. Every alliance forged, every soldier recruited, and every plan devised was infused with this solemn purpose. The sons were not merely seeking vengeance, they were fulfilling a destiny foretold by their father's legacy, ensuring that Ragnar Lothbrok's life and death would echo through generations. By the time their forces were fully assembled and their plans meticulously laid, the sons of Ragnar had transformed from grieving boys into a unified and formidable force. Bjorn's strength, Ivar's cunning, Sigurd's wisdom, Fitzurk's diplomacy, and Ubi's courage combined to form a brotherhood whose resolve was unbreakable. The stage was set for a campaign that would not only avenge their father, but also leave an indelible mark on history. Their unity, forged in the crucible of tragedy, became the bedrock of a relentless pursuit that would see Ragnar's killers hunted down one by one, and the vengeance of the Lothbrok sons, etched into the chronicles of the Viking Age. The sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, having gathered their forces and meticulously prepared for vengeance, were ready to take the first decisive steps in their campaign against Northumbria. The death of their father was no ordinary loss. It was a stain on their family honor, an act of cruelty that demanded immediate and brutal retribution. Their preparation had been long and thorough, but now it was time to move from planning to action. The initial strikes were not only a test of their strength and unity as brothers, but also a calculated demonstration of the ferocity that awaited their enemies. Bjorn Ironside led the charge with his characteristic boldness. Known for his fearlessness in battle, he commanded the vanguard of the Viking forces, striking first at towns and fortresses along the Northumbrian coastline. These raids were executed with terrifying precision. Viking longships, fast and nearly silent under the cover of night, slipped through rivers and estuaries, landing wary oars far from the expected points of attack. Villages were stormed, their gates torn down and homes set ablaze. Monasteries, which held both wealth and influence, were pillaged, sending shockwaves through the region. The objective was twofold: to weaken King Aella's reach and to send a message that the sons of Ragnar were coming and they were unstoppable. Ivar the Boneless orchestrated these raids with cold, strategic brilliance. Despite his inability to fight on the front lines, he directed the movements of the army with a meticulous eye for detail. Ivar knew that vengeance required precision. Indiscriminate attacks would serve only to scatter their efforts and embolden Aella's forces. Instead, he focused on identifying key locations where loyal Northumbrian generals, advisors, and allies of the king were stationed. Each raid had a purpose beyond mere destruction. It was reconnaissance, a probing of defenses, and an assessment of the loyalty of those who had aided in Ragnar's capture. With every monastery looted and every village terrorized, the sons gathered intelligence, mapping the kingdom's vulnerabilities like a chessboard awaiting the decisive checkmate. The raids were not merely violent, they were psychological warfare. Ivar understood that fear could be as potent a weapon as any sword. Tales of the Viking onslaught spread quickly, and King Aella's subjects began to live in dread of the next strike. This fear, carefully stoked by Ivar's manipulation of rumors and stories, weakened the cohesion of Northumbria. Soldiers grew restless, some abandoning their posts out of terror, while local leaders questioned the king's ability to protect his people. The Vikings' reputation as ruthless, efficient warriors preceded them, and the initial strikes amplified that legend exponentially. Each successful raid emboldened the brothers, proving that their combined forces could strike anywhere, at any time. Sigurd Snake in the Eye and Fitzurk played crucial roles during this period as well. Sigurd's keen eye for detail allowed him to spot weaknesses in fortifications, exploiting gaps in defenses that others might have missed. He led smaller detachments on targeted missions, capturing or executing key Northumbrian officers who had played a role in Ragnar's downfall. Fitzurk's diplomacy also came into play, as he negotiated with local tribes and disaffected nobles who had been dissatisfied under Aella's rule. Many of these men, eager to see the king humbled, pledged their support to the sons of Ragnar, providing both manpower and inside knowledge that would prove invaluable for the larger campaign to come. The sons' strategy during these initial strikes was a careful blend of brute force and cunning deception. Bjorn's frontal assaults drew attention, capturing the eyes of enemy scouts and luring reinforcements into positions that Ivar had already anticipated. Meanwhile, smaller Viking units, under Sigurd's command, infiltrated villages and strongholds. From unexpected directions, striking at key figures and disappearing before counterattacks could be organized. This combination of fearsome strength and unpredictable tactics created a sense of chaos that spread through Northumbria, disrupting communication and coordination among Aella's forces. One particularly notable raid involved a small fortress thought to be secure under King Aella's watchful eye. Ivar had gathered intelligence that revealed the garrison's leaders were among those who had overseen Ragnar's imprisonment. Bjorn led the frontal assault, battering the gates with axes and hurling spears with relentless precision. Meanwhile, Sigurd led a flanking party through a hidden path along the river, slipping into the fortress undetected. The result was swift and brutal. The leaders were executed, the fortress seized, and the survivors left with a chilling message. Anyone who aided in Ragnar's death would meet a similar fate. This raid, like many others, was as much about sending a warning as it was about achieving tactical victory. Each act of vengeance sent ripples through Northumbria, leaving the king's court increasingly paralyzed with fear. Ubi, the youngest son, also made his mark during these early operations. Though inexperienced, his bravery and enthusiasm inspired the warriors around him. He often led daring raids against supply lines, disrupting food and weapon deliveries to Northumbrian forts and towns. These smaller skirmishes, while not as grand as the frontal assaults, were vital in weakening the enemy's capacity to respond effectively. The combination of large-scale destruction, targeted assassinations, and disruption of resources created a multi-layered campaign that systematically dismantled the king's ability to resist. As the initial strikes progressed, the sons of Ragnar began to identify patterns in the Northumbrian defenses. They learned the habits of the king's troops, the loyalty of the local nobles, and the morale of the common people. This intelligence would become the foundation for future campaigns, allowing them to anticipate reinforcements, plan ambushes, and systematically track down those responsible for Ragnar's death. Every raid, every skirmish, every captured messenger added to the growing picture of Northumbria's vulnerabilities. Ivar's brilliance, combined with the raw power of Bjorn and the tactical insight of Sigurd and Fitzurk, ensured that no opportunity for vengeance was overlooked. The psychological toll of the initial strikes on King Aella cannot be overstated. Reports of villages burned, fortresses seized, and trusted advisors executed reached him in waves, leaving him increasingly isolated and paranoid. The sons of Ragnar had not yet confronted him directly, yet their presence was felt everywhere. Aella's once loyal generals began to doubt their king's ability to protect them, and whispers of rebellion began to circulate among the nobles. By the time the Vikings prepared for the next phase of their campaign, the kingdom was already weakened from within, a testament to the strategic genius of Ivar and the disciplined execution of his brothers. Thus, the initial strikes of the sons of Ragnar were far more than mere acts of revenge. They were carefully orchestrated, precise operations designed to terrorize, weaken, and destabilize Northumbria while simultaneously preparing the ground for the ultimate confrontation with King Aella. The raids demonstrated the deadly combination of their talents: Bjorn's fearless aggression, Ivar's cunning strategy, Sigurd's tactical brilliance, Fitzurk's diplomacy, and Ubi's youthful audacity. Each action brought them closer to their goal, while instilling fear and uncertainty in the hearts of their enemies. By the end of this phase, it was clear to all that the sons of Ragnar were not just seeking vengeance. They were systematically hunting down those responsible for their father's death. One target at a time. With the initial strikes executed and Northumbria destabilized, the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok moved into the next, far more calculated phase of their vengeance, systematically hunting down those responsible for their father's death. By now, the Viking raids had sown panic across the kingdom. Soldiers and nobles alike were on edge, aware that the sons of Ragnar were not mere raiders. They were a relentless strategic force with a singular purpose. Ivar the Boneless in particular ensured that this phase of the campaign was orchestrated with ruthless efficiency. No target would be overlooked, no enemy underestimated, and every strike would serve to tighten the noose around King Aella himself. The hunt was both physical and psychological. While the brothers' warriors continued to conduct raids and skirmishes, Ivar and Sigurd focused on mapping the social and political networks that had enabled Aella's cruelty. Every general, commander, and advisor who had played a role in Ragnar's capture was meticulously tracked. Spies and informants infiltrated villages and courts, bringing detailed reports of troop movements, loyalties, and weak points. Fitzurk and Ube coordinated with these scouts, ensuring that the brothers could strike where it would hurt the most, targeting key figures whose deaths would destabilize Aella's regime further and create a domino effect of fear and chaos. The first wave of these targeted hunts focused on generals and advisors who had overseen the capture and imprisonment of Ragnar. These men were often heavily fortified and surrounded by loyal troops, yet the Vikings' combination of cunning and ferocity proved devastating. Sigurd, with his uncanny ability to read the battlefield and identify weaknesses, led small elite teams to infiltrate forts and garrisons. He orchestrated ambushes that left little room for escape, ensuring that those responsible would face the same swift and brutal justice that had claimed Ragnar. In many cases, the victims were executed publicly, sending a stark message to Aella and the remaining loyalists. The sons of Ragnar were thorough, precise, and unyielding. Bjorn Ironside's approach remained the embodiment of raw strength and intimidation. He led attacks that drew attention, forcing Aella's troops into defensive positions, while Ivar's intelligence teams identified the critical targets hidden within the chaos. Bjorn's presence on the front lines was both a tactical advantage and a psychological weapon. Tales of his ferocity spread faster than the wind, demoralizing defenders and emboldening Viking forces. His assaults often served as a distraction, allowing Ivar to deploy smaller, more precise units to capture or eliminate key figures with minimal resistance. The sons also recognized the importance of cutting off Northumbria's support systems. UBB, alongside Hvitserk, focused on disrupting supply lines, raiding food stores, and sabotaging reinforcements. By systematically weakening the kingdom's ability to respond, they ensured that Aella's forces would be vulnerable when the final confrontation inevitably came. Towns that had been complacent under Northumbrian rule were now destabilized, and local nobles who had once pledged loyalty to Aella began to waver. Some even secretly allied with the sons, offering guides, intelligence, and safe passage for the Vikings, a testament to the fear and respect their reputation commanded. Ivar's strategic genius was particularly evident during this phase. Despite his physical limiter, Shans, he was able to anticipate Aella's moves with almost prophetic accuracy. He set traps that forced enemy troops into ambushes, orchestrated diversions that scattered defenders, and employed psychological tactics that left opponents uncertain of where and when the next strike would come. His ability to coordinate complex operations over vast distances transformed the campaign from a series of raids into a calculated purge. Each kill, each captured messenger, each destroyed stronghold was a step toward systematically dismantling the network that had enabled Ragnar's death. As the hunt progressed, the brothers also exploited personal vendettas within Northumbria. Discontented nobles, betrayed generals, and rival factions were persuaded or coerced into assisting the Vikings, either by providing intelligence or by direct participation in the strikes. Hvitserk's diplomatic skills were crucial here, as he could navigate the complex web of loyalties and grievances, turning potential enemies into tools of vengeance. This not only increased the effectiveness of the campaign, but also amplified the psychological terror that spread throughout the kingdom. Every village, fortress, and town was aware that the sons of Ragnar were hunting their enemies methodically, and the fear of retribution became as powerful as any army. Among the most chilling aspects of this phase was the deliberate and symbolic nature of the executions. Those who had captured or betrayed Ragnar were not simply killed. They were punished in ways that mirrored the cruelty they had inflicted. Officers were left to die in pits, betrayed nobles were exposed to humiliation, and traitorous soldiers were executed in public, ensuring that the lessons of fear and respect were clear to all who witnessed. This methodical, symbolic vengeance transformed the campaign from a personal vendetta into a calculated message that resonated across Northumbria. Betrayal of the Lothbroks would be met with inevitable and precise retribution. Despite the methodical precision, the hunt was not without danger. Northumbria's defenders were familiar with Viking tactics and launched counterattacks whenever possible. However, the unity of Ragnar's sons combined with Ivar's foresight and Bjorn's unyielding strength ensured that each threat was met decisively. Even when facing larger forces, the sons relied on speed, surprise, and superior intelligence to overcome the opposition. Their victories were not merely tactical, they were statements of dominance, each one reinforcing the notion that the sons of Ragnar were unstoppable. The hunt also strengthened the bond between the brothers. Initially, differences in temperament and approach, Bjorn's impulsive aggression versus Ivar's calculated strategy, had caused tension, But the shared purpose of hunting Ragnar's killers forged a cohesion that was unbreakable. Each brother's strengths complemented the others, creating a synergy that magnified their effectiveness on the battlefield. Bjorn's raw power, Ivar's cunning, Sigurd's tactical insight, Fitzurk's diplomacy, and Ubi's youthful audacity combined to make them a force that Northumbria could neither predict nor counter effectively. As the net tightened around King Aella, fear and uncertainty spread like wildfire through his court. Advisors who had once plotted and schemed with confidence now doubted their ability to survive. Soldiers hesitated to follow orders, knowing that their failure or betrayal could bring them into the crosshairs of the Lothbrok sons. This internal chaos played directly into the Vikings' hands, allowing them to dictate the pace of the campaign. The kingdom's morale was eroded from within while facing relentless strikes from without, a combination that made the final confrontation with Aella not just likely but inevitable. By the end of this phase, the sons of Ragnar had transformed their grief and anger into a precise and devastating campaign of vengeance. Every raid, ambush, and execution had one purpose: to ensure that Ragnar's killers could be hunted down one by one, and that King Aella would face the full consequences of his cruelty. Northumbria was no longer merely a kingdom under threat, it was a kingdom under siege where fear and terror became weapons as lethal as axes and swords. The hunt had tightened, the noose around the enemies of Ragnar Lothbrok was closing, and the stage was set for the final act of vengeance after months of relentless raids, target, hunts, and carefully orchestrated strikes. The sons of Ragnar Lothbrok had brought Northumbria to its knees. The kingdom's villages lay in ruins, its fortresses captured or burned, and its army demoralized and fractured. Fear had replaced loyalty, and uncertainty gripped the court of King Aella. Every action the sons had taken was a step toward the ultimate goal, confronting the man who had orchestrated their father's horrific death and ensuring that his end would be as legendary and merciless as the life he had attempted to destroy. The stage was now set for the final decisive confrontation. King Aella, once a confident and ruthless ruler, now found himself cornered and desperate. The initial strikes had caught him off guard, and the methodical hunt had exposed the weaknesses in his alliances and defenses. Advisors who had once pledged unwavering loyalty were either dead, in hiding, or secretly working against him. The morale of his troops had crumbled under the relentless pressure of the Viking onslaught. Aella's once mighty kingdom, fortified against foreign invaders, was now a shadow of its former strength. Even the bravest soldiers feared crossing paths with the sons of Ragnar, whose reputations as both warriors and strategists had grown into almost mythical proportions. The sons approached Aella with a combination of strategy and intimidation, fully aware that this final confrontation required both psychological and physical mastery. Bjorn Ironside, leading the vanguard, set the tone by demonstrating their overwhelming power. His forces surrounded Aella's stronghold, striking with terrifying precision and leaving no avenue of retreat. The walls of the castle were breached not merely through brute force, but through carefully executed tactics that exploited every known weakness. Aella's soldiers fought desperately, but against the combined might of Ragnar's sons, their resistance was futile. Each successful breach, each fallen defender, sent a clear message. The sons of Ragnar were unstoppable, and no mercy would be shown to those who had orchestrated their father's demise. Ivar the Boneless, the mastermind behind the campaign, ensured that every move was calculated to maximize both fear and effectiveness. Though he could not fight with sword or shield, his strategic acumen turned the battlefield into a chessboard, where every piece was manipulated with precision. He had anticipated Aella's defensive maneuvers, predicted reinforcements, and set traps to isolate the king from his remaining loyalists. Ivar's ability to turn Northumbria's own structures, geography, and intelligence networks against Aella was a testament to his brilliance. Every step taken by the sons of Ragnar had been meticulously planned to lead to this final, inevitable confro. Sigurd Snake in the Eye, and Fitzurk played pivotal roles in orchestrating the psychological pressure on Aella. Sigurd, with his tactical insight, ensured that escape routes were blocked and potential allies neutralized. Hvitserk, with his understanding of human behavior, manipulated local populations and nobles to further destabilize the king's support. Even Ubi, young and relatively inexperienced, contributed by leading small raiding parties to cut off food supplies and secure the surrounding territory. Together, the brothers created an environment in which Aella could neither fight effectively nor flee safely, isolating him both physically and mentally. The final confrontation itself was as brutal and legendary as the sagas recount. According to tradition, King Aella was captured and subjected to the Blood Eagle, a horrifying execution that mirrored the cruelty he had shown Ragnar. The method was symbolic as much as it was brutal, a display designed to serve as retribution and a warning to all who might dare betray or challenge the Lothbroks. In executing Aella in such a manner, the sons of Ragnar not only avenged their father, but also cemented their own reputations as fearsome and unstoppable figures in the Viking world. Every detail of the execution was laden with meaning, turning it into a spectacle that would be remembered for generations. The psychological impact of this final act was profound, both for the Vikings and for the remaining Northumbrians. The Blood Eagle was more than revenge. It was a statement of power, a message that betrayal and cruelty would be met with unrelenting justice. Aella's death completed the cycle of vengeance that had begun with Ragnar's capture, fulfilling the promises whispered by the father to his sons, even in his final moments. The kingdom, already weakened and demoralized, now faced the terrifying reality of the Lothbrok brothers' wrath, a force that had proven unyielding, patient, and devastatingly effective. Yet, beyond the spectacle and brutality, the confrontation highlighted the unique strengths of Ragnar's sons. Bjorn's raw power and leadership had inspired their forces and broken the enemy's will. Ivar's strategic genius had orchestrated every move with precision, ensuring that each action led to the ultimate objective. Sigurd's tactical brilliance and Hvitserk's diplomatic manipulations had dismantled Northumbria's alliances and weakened morale. Ube's youthful courage had supported the overall strategy, proving that every brother played a crucial role in achieving the ultimate goal. Their unity, forged in grief and honed in battle, had turned vengeance into an unstoppable force. After Aella's death, the sons of Ragnar did not rest. They consolidated their victories, ensuring that the kingdom could not regroup or retaliate. Loyalists were either executed, captured, or forced into exile, while the Viking forces established control over key territories. The campaign, initially driven by why the desire for revenge, had transformed into a larger assertion of power. Ragnar's death had set off a chain reaction, leading not only to retribution but also to the expansion of Viking influence across Northumbria. The sons had avenged their father, demonstrated their might, and solidified their legacy in one decisive, calculated campaign. The story of this final confrontation resonated far beyond Northumbria. Bards, poets, and storytellers across Scandinavia and Europe recounted the tale of Ragnar's death and the subsequent vengeance of his sons. The image of King Aella facing the Blood Eagle became a symbol of the consequences of cruelty and betrayal. Meanwhile, the saga of the sons' relentless pursuit of justice inspired future generations of Vikings, reinforcing the notion that loyalty, strategy, and courage could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. Ragnar's death, though tragic, had sparked a legend that would grow larger with each retelling, ensuring that his name and his son's vengeance would be immortalized in history. Ultimately, the final confrontation with King Aella was more than an act of revenge. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated campaign that blended grief, strategy, and raw Viking ferocity. The sons of Ragnar had taken their father's brutal death and transformed it into a narrative of justice and power, ensuring that those responsible paid the ultimate price. Their actions reshaped Northumbria, solidified their reputations, and cemented the legacy of Ragnar Lothbrok as one of the most legendary figures in Viking history. Through precision, patience, and relentless determination, they had hunted his killers down one by one, fulfilling both personal vengeance and historical destiny.